Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from, or if you are catching us on replay. This is The Awesome Journey, and I am your host, Kelle 𝒏𝒆𝒚, along with my co-host in care, Christy Howard. And we're just two girls that connected on LinkedIn 15 years ago, live on opposite sides of the country, have giving hearts, a passion for paying it forward, and I may have prayed to be living louder in my purpose. And now here we sit in front of microphones, bringing you The Awesome Journey. And for those of you that have been with us since the beginning, which this is episode 35, which I was totally shocked by, you know that Christy and I, in the beginning of the show, we were putting together our lists of people that we either wanted on the show, that we hope to be on the show, whatever. And at the top of Christy's list was our guest today, Mr. Jay Dobyns. And we had him on earlier this year in August 29th, to be exact. And unfortunately, there was a hurricane happening in Florida that day. So you're Christy's friend of 12 years, and she was the one that kept getting cut out and couldn't partake in the conversation. And I was much more focused on Operation Black Biscuit and some of the things that he has done during his career. And we had decided he absolutely needs to come back because we need to take a dive into the mental health aspects of being an undercover agent, for one, the impact on family, the transition into retirement, and some betrayal in the aftermath. And just as a reminder for those who were here and for those of you that don't know Jay, Jay worked with with ATF as an undercover special agent for over 20 years. He served 500 missions, if not more, actually, doing things from narcotics, weapons trading, human trafficking, hitman for hire, you name it, but is most well known for Operation Black Biscuit, which was right here in Arizona, where he infiltrated the Hells Angels for approximately 2 years, which is incredible. He is also a New York Times bestseller for his book, No Angel, which is about his harrowing journey infiltrating the Hells Angels, along with the sequel to the book, No Angel, the Catching Hell, the abandonment and the betrayal. And we'll include those book links in the comments as well as our post promo. And it's been in our book list that we've been putting out this year as well. And he's also been the inspiration of many, yes, there it is. And he's also been the inspiration of many documentaries. And most of you may know Den of Thieves and Gerard Butler has also been one that he has worked with. And then just to give an additional shout out, as if that's not enough, he was also quite the stud football player at the U of A, and I believe still holds some records there for being a receiver and a major badass. And I will also include, he was highly decorated, received many awards from the top to many medals of honor. And I could go on because that honestly is just scratching the surface of his accomplishments. So to get into it today, because I feel like Christy and I are going to switch places because she wasn't here first time around. So I'm going to play the interrupter today. And spend as much time as we can with Jay today. And we so thank you for your time, Jay. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us yet a second time. So we're just privileged. I will turn it over now to my co-host in here, Christy Howard.
Well, I'm excited. It's just chilly here today in Florida. No hurricanes.
Thank God.
Jay knows how much I adore him and all that he's done. He's a hero. I know he doesn't think that, but he's done stuff, as I always say, that looks, stuff that you see on TV. It actually does happen. As you mentioned about Gerard Butler, if anybody has ever seen the Den of Thieves, that's a great little Christmas movie, sort of like Die Hard. Best Christmas movie around. And if you want to know Jay's personality when he was undercover, just the first scene that Gerard comes out of a convenience store and how he talks. I remember seeing it and I didn't even realize Jay was involved in this movie. I'm like, oh my gosh, that person reminds me of Jay. So that's a movie that we'll talk about, but Den of Thieves, great movie. Anyway, Jay, thank you for mouthing the F word because I can't see you or hear you. And let's go for it. Let's start. We know that, and I don't want to go too much into the first book and that because I want people to read it. They have to read it to really get the understanding.
Yes.
But go on to what all happened in the aftermath and the betrayal. And
yeah, well, thank you, ladies, for having me back. The glorious and flattering introduction you gave, you delivered it exactly as I had written it for you.
You're welcome.
So, and you know, like Christy had mentioned, like the hero word, which gets thrown around. People read the books and people look at, you know, my life from the outside in. The reality of it is that, like, I'm nothing more than a common man who was placed in some uncommon situations and just did the best I could. There's really nothing special or unique about me. I've had a crazy adventure, and handled it like every other human being out there would, just the best you can on any given day.
Well, I'm going to disagree on the fact of not every human being would do what you've done.
no way.
Because you are unique in the sense of, I mean, just the fact of, for those of you that didn't hear the first time, and you do need to absolutely read the book, you were shot in your first week, it was threatening death, like you were near death shooting your first week of work at ATF, and your immediate thought was, I need to go back and do it better. Not everybody would do that.
Well, I think that is one of the issues that we deal with in law enforcement, and deal with better now, is that cumulatively over the course of a career, you have all these individual events that don't necessarily impact your mental or emotional health all on their own. But when you string years and years and years of those together, cumulatively, man, it creates damage. It's unavoidable. And like, thank goodness that we're now paying attention to it and addressing it. You know, law enforcement and first responder suicides are epidemic. And we need to talk about them, and we need to talk about how they're created, and then what are the solutions to those problems.
So how did you handle after the aftermath? And you can go into about the RICO charges, and not, you know, it went sideways, and then not having the support, but then not having a place for you to vent, you know, have some people hold you up. How did you handle that to go forward? And how was that on you? I mean, you know, I'm sure it was terrible, but how did you handle it over having it into your ego, or going into your heart, or just going underground and just saying, fuck it?
Well, you know, after the Hell's Angels infiltration finished, when they learned that Jay Davis, the gun runner, debt collector, contract killer, was actually Jay Dobyns, the undercover federal agent, man, things came off the rails. And you can't expect the tiger to change his stripes. That they are and reacted like who they are. Those guys have their PhDs in violence and intimidation, and they put them in play. So, you know, murder contracts were issued. They were picked up by the Aryan Brotherhood, by the MS-13, by 18th Street, by like lone wolves that wanted to make their bones. And so when it broke bad, after a career having been spent on behalf of my agency, when it came back on me, I didn't receive, you know, the support that I felt like I deserved. You know, in the end, I don't know that I deserved anything, to be quite honest with you. No one held a gun to my head. No one made me take any of these jobs. No one forced me into any of these assignments. They were all voluntary. But when it came back on me, I wanted some help. And that help was either didn't show up or was very slow to show up.
And I just do want to clarify for anyone that didn't hear the first one, to go on to that a little bit more, is, y'all, he spent 2 years, nearly 2 years of life infiltrating the Hells Angels, living with them, spending time with them, the whole nine. And then after the bust occurred, the ATF kind of turn their back on you. And when he's saying that there was murder contracts out, they were international murder contracts on him, threatening not just you, but also your family. And then to have your brotherhood, for lack of a better term, not be there, and truly they turn their back on you. I think that's something that we should all expect as human beings. Yes, you chose those positions, but I would think that that had to hurt a little bit, to say the least, for them to not be there to when you needed them the most.
Well, you know what? In fairness and in balance, like that probably deserves a disclaimer. Not the entire Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms turned their back on me.
Right, fair.
I was working for and being, I was under the thumb and under the supervision of a little pocket, a perfect storm of incompetence and arrogance and corruption, and in my opinion, criminal activity. Not the entire agency.
Are you talking about our government? That would be our government, right?
An agency? What? A federal agency?
The people that were responsible for me when the death and violence threats started coming, and not to get too far offline on this, but they were the same people that were running ATF's Operation Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
They were responsible for the decisions being made to traffic volumes of machine guns out of the United States to the cartels in Mexico. And these same guys who are supposed to stand for the prevention of those things were arming up the cartels and then just watching the body count in Mexico climb and using that as statistics to justify their operation. So the people I was working for were, in my opinion, were criminals. And I think that they've been proven to be criminals, not prosecuted as such, but proven to be criminals. But that's not the entire, that doesn't speak for the entire agency. And I think that's where people sometimes get that wrong. They think that I've got my heels set against ATF. I love ATF. I worked for some fabulous bosses. I worked for people that I'd run through a block wall for. Like I honor and respect and admire all those people out there with their boots on the ground who every day put their life at risk to keep me and you safe.
Well, and it's the suits. The suits are trying to climb that ladder, and that they don't care. I mean, you know, Brian Terry was murdered. You know, I forget his other name, the one in Texas. You know, and nobody cared because they were suits trying to climb the ladder. And for you and the whistleblowers, all the whistleblowers, you guys all got kicked to the curb. And going back, you put your life on the line for our country. Where's the support?
Handful of people that at ATF that doubled down on me, they were operating with impunity. They thought they could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, to whoever they wanted. And no one was jerking their leash. No one was holding them back. The people that supervised them in headquarters were supporting them until Brian Terry was killed, until Jaime Zapata was killed. And they're like, wait a minute, man, these guns came through ATF's fingers. How did that happen? You know, and that started happening at the same time. Things were breaking bad for me, and the death of Brian Terry and the death of Agent Zapata, in all truthfulness, were much bigger and much more important than anything that was happening to me. I understood that. I never tried to pretend or portray it to be anything other than that. I was just someone who was getting trampled in the process, and basically told, like, you know what, shut up and be quiet and don't talk about this. And I thought, if I don't challenge this, if I don't challenge this treatment, it's giving them permission to do it to the next guy. And that was part of the mission. I wanted to put an end to how undercover agents were being treated post-case, post-investigation.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate, and I'm glad you clarified that. Everybody knows that that's watching us. Christy and I back our first responders, and veterans for sure in every way, but there's just bad seeds in every organization, regardless of what institution it is. So I do thank you for clarifying that, because we're not saying that the entire organization is that way.
No.
It just takes a handful to create such damage, which they did in this instance. And I guess really now to kind of steer back into to how this impacted your family, because you being the guy, you can handle all these things. You're out there doing it, but when it then is turned onto your family, some of these threats that came through from, because you were on their list, and then that's a quite literal term. And when I'm saying they, I don't mean ATF. I'm talking about Hell's Angel, and the international contracts were out. How was that for you and your family?
Well, the threats crossed the line. The threats against me, the death and violence threats against me, I'd be silly to say that like those weren't to some extent anticipated, but
Yeah.
there was threats to kidnap my wife. There was threats to kidnap my kids. I ran into Hell's Angels who said, like, we know where your kids go to school. We know what buses they ride. You're going to be waiting for your son to get off the bus one day. And when he doesn't, think about where he's at, because he's with me, and think about what I'm doing to him. When the threats extended beyond a fair boundary, in August of 2008, my house was burned to the ground by arsonists. ATF basically told
And your family was in the house at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were gone.
ATF's response, my boss's response was, you're on your own. The scope of the threats, is too big. We don't even know where to start. One boss told me, just do this, maintain a heightened sense of awareness. That was their advice to me.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I got into a fist fight with some Hell's Angels on a commercial airline flight that was a no shit, like knockdown brawl, and it was never investigated. It was no one ever chased it. No one ever tried to find out who was involved.
What?
When so I challenged that. I challenged like why are you guys not interested in investigating these threats and putting an end to them? When I did that, ATF doubled down on me again and built a task force that was designed, and the objective and the mission was to frame me as the arsonist of my own house, and thus someone who was willing to kill their own family through a fire. And that's really when it broke bad. That was when it's like, nope, you know what, we ain't doing this. Like I've had enough.
Well, and you've got your loyal to the agency, and you've done so much, but when they don't even protect you, but mostly the family that have put up with this, all this time that you go and do the undercover. And you mentioned like, well, they didn't make me do this. You're an undercover agent. You have missions or cases or whatever. Someone's got to do it. They're going to go and talk to the person that they believe is a perfect match. That was your job, to do undercover.
Well, you know what? The precedent had been set by Joe Pistone, by like Donnie Brasco and his infiltration of the Bonanno crime family, by Jack Garcia, another FBI agent who had infiltrated the Gambinos, and the FBI. Those guys both received threats, death and violence threats. The FBI handled it the proper way. The example had been established. The FBI went to the heads of these crime families and said, you need to understand something. Our agent is off limits. He will not be touched. He will not be threatened. His family will not be threatened. The FBI established, this is the way you react to that. You confront the people that are making the threats, and you let them know whether we can or cannot prove this. This all stops right now. Right. ATF refused to do that.
God, that's insane. And And I guess the other side of that story, which at that moment, just the betrayal that would feel like, and like your world literally being flipped upside down. Like, how is this even happening? Getting blamed for burning down my own home with my family in it. But how was it with your family at that time? Because I would imagine, and as being a wife of an undercover agent to start with, it's a special breed. I mean, because you have to have a certain tolerance for a lot of things and understanding. But that had to be like next level. Holy shit! Like, how do we move forward with this?
Well, I will say this, and this is another disclaimer, right? Well, first of all, my family is uh, way better than I deserve. I've made a million mistakes in my life. I've done a million things wrong. And between God and my wife and my kids and my friends, they've all given me a million and one second chances to try to recover and 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 come back from that. So
Because they know your
it's really
heart.
been a blessing.
God
Um,
bless them.
They know that heart.
but like after my house was burned down, and I'm in the yard, my house is still smoldering. It's like it's still hot. The crime scene is still hot. Um, and my son, who was probably 10 years old at the time, is walking around the backyard, and he's got a carpenter's hammer in his hand, and he's pacing around in the backyard. And I asked him, I said, Jackie, what are you doing? What's the deal with the hammer? And he's like, Dad, you're never here. Like, what's going to happen if they come back? Who's going to take care of Mom? That is what I had done to my family. Because, and this is a very unflattering statement to make, I was selfish. I made choices and did things where was concerned with myself, not how it was going to impact other people in my life. There was a long stretch of my life, the majority of my time spent while I was undercover. I was not a good husband. I was not a good father. I regret that. I spend my time now trying to make up for those mistakes. I was too selfish to care about anybody but myself, and I paid the price for it.
Do you think, and we have found this out from other people we've talked to, and especially, men realizing, some clarity with your relationship with God, and everybody's, understands where Kelle and I land. Our faith is very strong. Do you feel that maybe your journey, you had to go through everything that you did to be able to get where you're at now with the family, and also get now with your own self
100%.
and to share the stories?
100%. I'm grateful for all the pain and suffering that I experienced, because there was an end game to it.
Yeah.
I'm closer now to my family than I've ever been. I'm closer now to God than I've ever been. The beauty of all this is that it revived my spirituality. I learned this, and you guys will probably agree with this. I learned, if the only time you're talking to God is when you're in trouble, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yep.
So true.
I talk to God all day long.
Oh.
Me and God are having one-way conversations all day long.
Yep.
I'm like, I hope you're listening, because I'm talking to you.
And he always listens. He always listens.
Yes.
I've learned because I'm working with, the job seekers and so many people that are going through the mental, the journeys. And just, in the last 15 years, I always just say, get out of your head, give it to God. It's already written.
Well,
he wants you to go through this hard
I tried
time.
to run my life based on my plan and what I wanted for a long time. And I realized, you know what, Jay, your plan sucks. It doesn't work out very good.
I think all three of us can say that, because I'm just like, I don't even make the plan. I just listen, just go.
Yes.
So after the fire and what, you were going through, did you step away? Did you just sort of go silent? Because you have, over the years, you come in and out. You ended up writing a second book, which was later. You also sued the government. Sorry, that's my doorbell.
Hello. So after the fire, and after this extended level of retaliation, right? I went to court, and in the pre-court hearings, the Department of Justice attorneys said, like, we know what you're going to prove. We know what the facts and evidence are. We know that you're going to win, but you need to understand something. We will never let you win. Yeah. We will motion this and appeal this and fight this, and we will out-resource you. You have a limited amount of money to fight us, and you have one attorney on your side. We have thousands of attorneys and millions of dollars to commit to beating you. That's what I was facing. And that was a few years.
You dealt with that for a few years, right?
I stepped into it anyways. We went to trial, and every single thing that I alleged was proven true.
Of course.
And you know what? No one cared.
No
one cared.
And you know, I mean, granted, it's interesting because, I mean, granted, my history with the system is way different, but mine was similar in the sense of it was against a police officer, and everybody knew he was right, and it was kind of the same thing, but there was really no anything, and I just know from my level on a the city level of how that crushed my soul. And granted, I know, I didn't work for the agency or anything, but that had to just be another level of screwing with your mind, because here I'm right, but I'm never going to be able to prove myself right. And I'm fighting a fight that I can't win. And you're not used to fighting fights that you can't win.
Well, I will say this, and I found this out the hard way, and I actually don't disagree with it. The machine of government is too big to care about the individual.
That's right.
If the machine of government, if the machine of ATF spends too much time worrying about Jay Dobyns, everything else that's important gets pushed aside. The machine can't function that way. Unfortunately, when you're in front of the steamroller, it rolls right over the top of you, and it rolls right over the top of everybody you love, and it doesn't stop because it can't stop.
Yeah, right. And I think one of the other things, kind of to go back now to more the mental health portion of it, is now that you're out, you've been battling, you're home with your family. What was that transition like? Because my thing would be, and I do think, we all have parts of our life that aren't pretty. The fact that you admit and own the fact that you were selfish at times is a beautiful thing. So
because he dances with his skeletons. I'm going to get a T-shirt. He dances with the skeletons.
It needs to happen.
You know what? It's humiliating to make that statement before an audience that like I don't know where this is going. I don't know who's going to see this. And it's like Christy said, like when she read No Angel, she's like, man, I did not like Jay Davis. I did not like Jaybird in No Angel. He's an asshole, right? Well, you know what? Imagine being my family and living with that guy. There was times when I would come home. That one example, I'd been gone for a long time, extended amount of time. And I came in and my wife said, you cannot be gone and then walk in this house and talk to us like we're street gangsters. And then in my defense, I was like, I can't turn this on and off like a light switch. I have to be on. People that do what I do for a living and don't live it end up dead. And then her response was, you need to take that light switch and install a dimmer and dial that attitude down. And if you can't, you're not welcome back here. And that is what I had done to my family.
Yeah. And that's, I
here's the situation with my family where I wasn't welcome at my own house. No one did that to me.
Right.
No one held a gun to my head. Those were my choices and my mistakes and my failures and my regrets that I live with.
But Jay, sharing this story, and you're like, it's your vulnerability, which is strength, but this is the whole reason why Kelle and I pivoted many times. We're about the stigma of mental health for men. And you didn't have a place to be able to have, you had your friends, you had the other undercover guys and everything, but they're going through their own shit in their own homes of what they're dealing with. And to be able to share with this audience and whoever's seen it, understanding that you are taking full, you take full responsibility and said, hey, this is what I was, this is what I did. And however, I'm taking full freaking responsibility for this. Now I know what's important because I grew from this shit.
You hit it on the head, Christy, is you vent to people for support. And they have their own lives and their own problems to deal with. The truth is, most people don't care about your individual problems. There's a handful that are probably happy that you have them, but life is literally 10% of what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. Is the truth. I had foolishly convinced myself that I had hundreds and hundreds of friends. And then things break bad and you realize you have hundreds and hundreds of acquaintances. Yep. You have a handful of friends that check in on you, see how you're doing with sincerity, that do it regularly, that actually care about you. The hurtful part of it, and there's no one to blame for this, is that people that you loved and counted on and trusted stop calling. They don't return texts. They don't want to be associated with you, or in my case with me, because I was airing out ATF's dirty laundry and they didn't want to be involved in that. And I understood why, because they didn't want to be tainted or retaliated behind Jay Dobyns. It was better and easier for them to just be quiet and let me take my beating on my own.
Which is a shame. It really is a shame in any situation, because, and I've seen it with myself, but I've seen it with a lot of other men. When you're always that person that picks everybody else up and who's always supportive and who's always caring, even in an asshole way sometimes, but still the heart's still showing. But when you're in a bad place, no, it's crickets. No one's around. And then all of a sudden you start seeing those people that are actually around, and you start appreciating what you have over all those friends we thought we had.
Well, I'll tell you what, ATF and not just ATF, I think just institutions, and in my case, are very good at creating a sense that you are isolated. No one supports you. No one's on your side. No one cares about you or loves you. And man, there's a reason why prisoners, convicts, are put in solitary confinement, because that breaks the human factor in half. When you feel like no one is paying attention, no one cares, no one loves me, man, that is more powerful than anything anybody can do, is that sense of isolation. And ATF made me feel like I was isolated.
I mean, how could you not feel that way? That's just terrible. And one of the things that I've always thought over the years too is, I was the wife of a police officer who worked SWAT and ironically ended as a domestic violence detective, and was in a domestic violence relationship and went through the years of crap with him and him being in and out of jail. But understanding later and learning this, because it's like, and I've had other spouses of first responders over the years also reach out to me, because none of us knew. Like, I thought I was alone. Like, I thought I really was a shitty wife because he told me I was a shitty wife. because he came home and he was still on duty. He couldn't shut it off, and not having anyone to talk to. And I know that there's a lot of resources that are offered now, not just for people working in these institutions, but it's also the families. The families are so impacted, and I don't know, I certainly wouldn't have stayed just because I would have had an understanding, but I think just to have an understanding of it's not me, it really is him. Because when you're in it, you do think that you're part of the problem, and it's so difficult. And this is why I was saying, how did you guys pick up the pieces and start rebuilding? Because you were literally starting all over from the foundation, not to play on the deal with your house burning down, but your family relationship was burnt to the ground and had to be rebuilt, and that had to be a journey in and of itself.
Well, I think that you talk to police psychologists or police psychiatrists, and their advice always is don't bring the job home, leave it at work. But when you're in these like dynamic alpha dog pipe hitter operations and situations and cases and investigations, it is not possible to at 5 o'clock or whenever that whistle blows at the end of the day to turn that off and to become someone else. At least it wasn't for me. I was terrible at that. I brought all that home and I put it on everybody that was in my house. They didn't sign up for that. Mm-hmm. My kids, my wife, they didn't sign up for me to be king shit undercover and Donnie Brasco part 2 and do, violent crime investigations and infiltrations. They wanted a husband and a father, and I had failed them.
So did you go, I'm going to do 2 questions. So did you, once all this shit was going on and the case was over, and people can Google it or Jay can share it, but did you just shut off life and say, this is what's important to me? And how did you get involved with the movie industry? So those are 2 different questions.
Right. Like shutting off. And I know that the world and the environment that you guys operate in is very social media driven. And I think social media is wonderful on the good side. Like for me, like I have no social media. I have no social media presence. And I'll tell you why. For all the good things that come from it, being able to like keep up with your friends and see what their kids are doing and see where they go on vacation and all those fun things, I was giving people the opportunity to attack me and attack me anonymously. And when I came to understand that, I was like, this is not their problem. This is who they are. Jay, this is your problem because you're giving them the vehicle to insult you and humiliate you and attack you. And so, I closed everything off, good or bad, right or wrong. But I'll tell you this, my life is much more peaceful without social media in it than it was with it.
I bet.
I do want to mention quickly, because I'm looking, we have this streaming on different social, like our Facebooks, her page, my page. This is the main LinkedIn one. Box is here. He says, my hero. Carlos will be coming and seeing us next year. And then if I mention Tom Smith.
When you mentioned Carlos 𝒏𝒆𝒐𝒆 and that you're going to have him on as a guest, when I talked about like that sense of abandonment and isolation, Box was one of those dudes who was constantly on the phone to me, constantly checking up. Dude, how you doing? You okay? You hanging in there? Fight back. Stay in the fight. Don't give up. Don't quit. Box was one of my heroes.
He calls you your hero. But that's why you 2 are, your personalities, you'll always stand up for the underdog. And then Tom Smith, who you're going to be on with Dan Murphy, who Tom and Dan will be on with us in January. You're going to be on with them. So we're going to be bringing on a lot of, obviously a lot of people that sort of intermingle that I got to know through Jay.
Well, like our community and your guys' extension of it, really in the grand scheme of things is small, but like all we got is each other. All like
Mm-hmm.
if all we have is each other, then that's all we have. But man, lean into your friends, lean into those people who want to support you and want to love you. Man, put your arms around them because they're super important.
Yeah. And I
Well,
think what you just said, we try to remind everybody, not just because it's the holidays, but all year, but particularly during the holidays, is reach out to that person you haven't heard from in a while. Send them a text, send a phone call, send an email, just check on them. And then now to swing back into Christy's second question was, how did you get into being an
well, in the
inspiration?
movie industry, because you were involved in a few things, but the Den of
Yeah.
Thieves.
That Den of Thieves, that was just a very interesting adventure and opportunity for me. You know, my story became publicized. I met the director. He was working on this script. I helped him develop the script. I met with several times over an extended amount of time with Gerard Butler, who was playing the lead role, trying to help him build that character. Then I was hired to come onto the set and coach the cop characters on basically on my friends. I used all the examples of my partners and my peers to help those characters build their character. And I'll say this, and I've said this many times publicly and privately, I thought those guys were exceptional. They were exceptional mimics. That's why they're great. Those actors are great at what they do.
Well, and that's why I said when I saw that first scene, I'm just like, oh my God, that's so Jay.
So
but going in,
and there's a character in the film that was written for Wolfgang, is the character's name. Mm-hmm. And so the character, the actor that was going to play Wolfgang, had to leave the set for another opportunity. So there was this hole in this for the actors. And they said, hey, look, like we need to replace Wolfgang. He's this kind of drunk, misfit idiot. And I was like, man, I can play that guy and I don't even have to act. That's who I
am. But when people watch it, notice the ID card picture. Just notice that.
Right.
Part.
Well, and I'll tell you why I was so impressed with those actors is because I gave them everything I had, and I embraced trying to help them. They absorbed all that, but all those characters, all those cop characters, they're all based on my friends and my peers, and so if you don't like the way they act, and if you don't like the way they conduct themselves, then you probably wouldn't like my boys, because they're some alpha dog pipe hitters, man. They're no nonsense cats. And those actors took that and translated it to film.
Well, and what's interesting is that as an undercover agent, you also are an actor.
That's such a good point. And that came up on set. Actually, I'm a terrible film actor, to be quite honest with you. And I wasn't shy about that. So I said, I'm not comfortable with this. And the actors would ask me, how can you be an undercover agent and be so successful and then be uncomfortable pretending? And I said, here's the difference, is that as an actor, you have a script that you have to follow, and you have direction that you have to follow. When I was undercover, everything was fluid. I was writing my script. I was directing the play. I could totally freelance and be Jaybird versus following a document and a director's commands.
No, that's true.
And
plus, you were passionate about it.
You're sitting there on a set with 50 people behind the cameras, with cameramen and grips and sound people and extras, and so it wasn't as organic. I grew to have a ton of respect for those actors to be able to do that and convince us as an audience that they're real.
So do you see yourself writing again another book?
Man, you know what? I think everybody out there, everybody listening has a book in them. Everybody has a life experience that is interesting and worth telling. The hard part is taking that and translating it to paper and making it make sense and making it like follow a understandable path.
Well, we've got ChatGPT now.
It's therapeutic in a way. There's a therapy to it. There's a
Yeah.
cleansing to it,
Yeah.
but it's super hard to do. So to answer your question, like, am I going to write anymore? I don't know if I have it in me.
Well, you still have
Interesting.
the story. I mean, you still have the story because the journey's still going on to understand where, after all this, and the life of the quietness, the life of the coaching, the life of this, coming back out, because you've been sort of missing there for about a year or so, coming out and sharing your story over. And I mean, I've known you for many years, over the ego sharing the story.
Well,
You're sharing
the
it from
only
your heart.
way that I can have credibility with you guys, with your audience, is to be honest and to be transparent. If all I did was sit here and tell hero stories and success stories, that's only a small part of the big picture, of the umbrella of the story.
Right.
If I don't talk about my failures and my flaws and my mistakes, then this image that I'm presenting to your audience is counterfeit.
Well, and I
We
think
don't
that
do counterfeit.
yeah, no. One of the things I was thinking about a little bit earlier when you were talking about, the transition and admitting all these things and being all about you and the job, is after that transition, and there had to be so many moments during that time where it's like you had to see finally, like, holy shit, I am not my job, but I am my job, because you were your job. That was your full definition, was by all of your accomplishments, until it all came crashing down. And then it's like, I need to be Jay Dobyns. I don't need to be Jaybird anymore.
That's a great point and a great question, in that, and that was one of my failures, in that Jaybird Davis, the gun runner, debt collector, contract killer, it stopped being what I did for a living, and it started becoming who I was. And that's very dangerous when you can't escape the role.
Yeah, and I think I read
Very
somewhere there was
dangerous place.
a quote that you made, something to the effect of, whether or not you infiltrated the Hells Angels or the Hells Angels infiltrated you,
I
which I
think
thought was
both
very.
happened. I think both took place. And you know what? You can never undercover out the human factor. Like,
No.
you can play a role, you can assume a false persona, but you can never get rid of the pure human factor, in that you're dealing with people. And so
Mhm.
I was dealing with the suspects and the targets of the investigation. Not every day and not every minute was spent with them where they were doing something violent or despicable or vile or against the law.
Right.
I spent time with them, and I got to see them as people with their families, socially. And then you'd see elements to these people that you're investigating that either have done terrible things or are planning terrible things, but you see the human side of them, and you see, like, man, you're so much better than this. I've seen the better side of you than this.
Mhm.
But we all make our choices. Now we all make our choices on what we do and what we say, and then and then you live with them.
Well, because the Hells Angels is very big about charities and stuff like that, yet it's still a business. It's just like, and thanks for bringing up Jack. I need to reach out to him. The Italian the mafia, they're all about the family. However, they go out.
In church.
These gangs, these organizations are human. They make their choices. They will do these nice things. However, I mean, your whole thing when you're up in Vegas, that huge fight.
Laughlin.
Well, I'll say this: in spite of your interactions as an undercover with people who are like, I was on the hunt for violence. I was on the hunt for bad people doing bad things to good people. I always considered it like a privilege and an honor to carry a badge and a gun, and to take a stand on behalf of good and innocent people against the predators. But it was never personal for me. I never set out to ruin anybody's life. I never set out to, like, make sure that anybody spent the rest of their life in prison. I had a job to do. My job was to gather intelligence and evidence, and then I would report that out to a case agent or prosecutors, ultimately judges and juries. I didn't decide if these people were convicted or not. I just was the conduit of information and intelligence. Other people made those decisions. It wasn't personal for me. I just did my job the best I could do it.
Well, and with the information that you had, and you figured the shit out. Having the mindset, being around them, and how do I want to say this? Somehow understanding their thinking to be able to get them. Would that be the way you would have done that?
I think that if you can't assimilate and integrate into their world, you're not going to be successful as an undercover operator.
Right.
Right.
He used big words. I just, did Christianese.
Because the thing is, when you assume a false persona and then go into that world, you're playing in their stadium now. You're playing by their rules now, not by society's rules, not using the Constitution or society's laws. They dominate and control everything. So you have to learn how to play within the context of their world and stay legal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I liked on the last episode, the example that you gave is when the bust finally came through and there was all the arrests and SWAT, went into the clubhouse or whatever and was taking a photo. And, you were saying tactically, and 100% zero disrespect in any way was stated or is trying to be restated in any way. They work hard, but tactically they were practiced, they rehearsed, they knew the ins and outs of the clubhouse, what was where, and how to go in, and could practice before they went in. You had no practice. You were on stage 24/7, for lack of a better term, and to be able to, that's a different thing, because you're having to act on the fly all the time with Lord knows what's going to be thrown at you next, because you were tested big time during that period to see if you were worthy and that you were legit, because they're always trying to prove you wrong, that you are an outsider, because they don't just let anybody in because you're a cool dude.
Well, the targets, the suspects, the criminal element, they're uniquely paranoid, and they have to be paranoid. That's part of how they survive. That paranoia keeps them out of jail and keeps them out of prison. They're inherently not trusting. So you better be pretty good at what you do at defeating that mistrust, defeating the skepticism. And then if you're good at it, you gain trust, you gain loyalty. In some cases, you gain love when you spend enough time with someone. And then ultimately you're going to betray all that. Man, that's another of the human sides of it. If you've been tricked and deceived and betrayed, man, that creates hard feelings.
So we got, I don't know who it is. Somebody asked the question, sorry. And I think you've mentioned this, you've talked about this, but they might be just jumping back on. Did Jay ever feel like he was becoming something he was hunting? And I think you were, when you were in the Hell's Angels, I would think any of your cases, you would have to become there to understand them.
Well, you feel like it. Of course you feel like it, but like I also experienced it. Like I had the crap kicked out of me by the cops on more than one occasion, right? Because they didn't know that I was anything other than what I was portraying myself to be. So and then, to be convincing in that role over an extended period of time, if you're not real, if you're not believable, then you're not gonna last. You're not gonna have success, and chances are you're gonna get hurt.
I was going to say, you probably aren't going to survive. But that's kind of like the, I guess, part of the rush of it. But the other part that, from an outsider, that's so terrifying, because there is no way you rehearse. You just have to get thrown in and learn as you go. And I would imagine get moved up, the more successful that you are on smaller type cases. But you're right. It's not like you can screw up and go, whoops, I can go back tomorrow and fix it.
Well, I'll say this, when the opportunity for the Hells Angels infiltration was presented, at that point in my career, I'd already had 15 years of undercover experience behind me. I'd bought guns and bombs and drugs and been involved in infiltrations and murder for hires and home invasions and all those things. And I still wasn't ready. I still wasn't prepared.
Are you ever, would you have ever been prepared for any case that you'd walk into?
I think that when the opportunity was presented to me to make a run at the Hells Angels, my first response to the case agent was, I can name 10 guys right off the top of my head that will serve you better in this role, that are really good at functioning in this culture, in this environment, that I didn't feel like I was the guy. The case.
And why was that? I'm
sorry?
Why was that?
Because, that biker world has its own subculture and its own rules. And
you didn't even know how to ride a motorcycle then, did you? You had to learn.
Specialized in all that. I thought, like, man, they're going to assimilate much smoother and much easier than I would have. And it was, it was trial by fire. It was like dive in. And I think the thing that, and I've said this, but I think it's worth restating. I never considered myself to be the best undercover agent out there. The thing that I had going for me is that I was always willing. I was always willing to try. I was always willing to raise my hand and take cases that either people felt were too dangerous or too complex, or for whatever their reason why they didn't want to take it. I always said yes. I was more afraid. I wasn't afraid of failing. I was afraid of how I would feel about myself if I didn't try.
So you were fearless. So talk about your tattoos, since the government paid for it, but how you had to cover some things up.
I've got a lot of tattoos. I've got tattoos on my back, on my chest, on my arms. I will say this. I did not get one tattoo for the purposes of working undercover.
Oh, I thought, okay. I was wrong.
All the tattoos I got them because I wanted them. Now, did I use them to my benefit to help enhance my credibility, my appearance? Of course I did. But like, I was buying drugs and guns and bombs and being successful as a street operator long before I ever had a tattoo.
Yeah, and you did for years. And granted, I noticed last time we talked to you, because I saw several interviews before we had you on the first time, is you wore the rings for years too.
That was just part of the character. There isn't any now, I
noticed that last time.
I finally escaped that role. It took me a while. One of the complaints with ATF against me was like, this guy can't get out of role. And I resisted that for so long. No, that's just an excuse. That's an alibi. That's a reason for you to treat me bad. They were 100% truth. That was accurate. That assessment. Like, I was struggling to get out of that role and leave that persona and that personality behind.
What was that process like? Like, how did you finally get out of the role and get back to who Jay Dobyns is?
Well, like Christy said, like when she read No Angel, like I did not like Jay Bird. You know what? I don't like Jay Bird either. I try to bury that guy. That is not a pleasant person. Now, Jay Bird can come out when and if he needs to, if the circumstance presents itself, I can get back to that guy, but I do my very best to keep that person buried because he's not pleasant to be around.
So how did you find out who Jay was after all these years? Yeah. And you were the football player, and then you get into undercover and all these different personas. Who is Jay?
I think ultimately, the ego and the flattery of having success in an undercover role, I realized how shallow that was. And I feel now like I'm much more back to who I was before I even came on the job, before I even had a badge or a gun. It took a while. It took a long time. It took longer than it should have, to be honest with you. But like I feel like I'm like back to when I was almost as a kid. Like I'm just back to being a goof again.
Good.
Love it.
No,
Love it.
you know, and again, I truly believe that we all go through the shit, the darkness, the hell.
Well, and it's not always, you know what, I'm not sure that it's always even good. Is that like my ego and my arrogance and my self-confidence was so high when I was operating. Like I feel like I've gone back to being insecure, but it's all like, it's all the human part of it.
Yeah.
It's like now I'm like concerned with things that when I was operating, like I wasn't concerned with. I didn't care how people looked at me or what they thought of me, or if they liked me or didn't like me, or if they admired me or didn't admire me. Now, like coming back and being more normal, all those insecurities show back up, but it's normal. That's like who I was not normal.
I always use with a lot of my posts, it's about being the phoenix. You burned to the ground, and now you're just slowly in your own terms now, because you don't answer to the agency. You answer to who you know, your family, your love, your faith, and you're becoming that phoenix. But you're going to go through that trying time going, where the hell's that confidence I used to have? Well, that confidence was your ego. So now it's your heart.
I have a lot of regrets, but I have made steps to try to repair some of those relationships that I ruined, and repair some of those relationships to reach out to people that I know had their heels set in the ground against me, to say, you know what, like I'm going to ask you for forgiveness. I'm going to ask you to give me a second chance. Whether you do or not is up to you. I can't tell you how to react. But I have learned this, is that for me, at least, it's much easier to forgive other people than it is to forgive ourselves.
That was my next question. How's that working for you? How, you know, of learning how to forgive ourselves, because we all have regrets.
I'm not burning for anybody. The people that issued threats against me, the people that intended harm for me within ATF, like I'm not burning for any of them.
Yeah, why?
Well, I would like to see them live happy, peaceful lives. I'm not holding any grudges towards anybody. And if they hold them towards me, like all I can do is say, I'm sorry, let me try again.
Well, and it's also on them, and it's their journey.
Right.
And as you mentioned at the beginning, that your relationship with God has gotten bigger, and understand that we're all sinners. We all make mistakes. We all do screw ups.
And for me, that's been the most important thing, is that is the forgiveness part. And like I'm still fighting and trying to figure out how to forgive myself. I'm like almost the one guy that I can't forgive.
I can understand. Not, you know, I've seen, and Kelly and I both have seen a lot of the men that we've spoken to, and I think it's the alpha male that it is hard, because you look back as saying, I don't deserve forgiveness of what I've put people through, I've gone through, but you do deserve forgiveness. And I can say, because we're coming up to the time, but I personally can say, you are somebody, yes, you have ego and everything, but I see it, Jay, of the person I always knew that was. Your heart showing. The ego's not directing you. Your heart is. And what's important to you is your family. And that, I just think, is a testament.
Well, for so long, I chased a reputation. I chased what I believed was a legacy. The reality is my reputation was crashed. There was no legacy. If there's a legacy, I want it to be that that Jay believes in Jesus, and that he ultimately learned to love and treat the people that are in his life with the dignity and the integrity that they deserve and they've earned.
And you have to treat yourself with that as well.
Well, when you get that formula figured out, please text, email, or call me.
You'll get it one day. One day, all of a sudden, you'll be like, "I'm there." There's no formula. It's just going through that journey. It's
just letting it go.
but embracing the journey instead of us fighting it. You know, I'm a big person, and you know, Jay and I've known each other for years. He's seen me in bad places, and I used to just get over the shit. We don't get over the shit. We have to go through it.
That's right.
And that's the worst part, when you're going through the shit.
Well, the thing is that like when you're being honest with yourself, you cannot erase the hard drive of your memory. Like I continually think of all the things that I said or did that I should not have said or did, or the vice versa. The things I should have done or should have said that I skipped over. Like that is that tape that plays in your head. Every time you start feeling good about yourself, it reminds you, hey, you know what? Pump the brakes, dude. You know, because you've got a lot of battle damage behind you.
Kelly, what was that other statement I use all the time? I think it's called
get out of your head.
Because that's one of our most dangerous places, because that's where our, you know, the person who's beating the shit out of us up in top of the head going, you're not worthy, you're crap.
Right. I was going to say, that's the voice that gets, you know, ignited in all of us at times, is that I'm not good enough, the insecurity that's in every single one of us. And it's just however loud that voice gets. And then I could not agree more about the forgiving yourself last. I mean, I struggled through a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I was still so heavy on, and I couldn't figure out why do I still feel this way? And it was, because I haven't forgiven me. And then that's such a difficult thing to do. And as Christy was saying, because we're up on the hour, Jay, first of all, we're
gonna bring him back. I mean, it's like at the Coach House right here.
Yes. Can we have a cocktail next time? Let's do that.
I didn't tell you that I've got my coffee.
There you go. It says every day matters. There you go.
Is just to sort of wrap up, sort of final thoughts, and maybe a little final gift of inspiration to the audience that you may have.
Well, I think that we've probably already touched on it. Is that, like, for me, like when I accepted my spirituality and embraced it, that was life-changing for me. And then, like, trying to learn how to forgive ourselves for our mistakes and our failures. Man, my list of flaws, we don't have enough time. If we started making a list of all the things wrong with Jay, like it would take weeks. But being honest about them, and being honest about those failures and those glitches, and then, you know, we're going to make mistakes. The key is trying not to repeat them.
And sometimes we do.
Yeah, true story.
I do.
Christy? Yeah, me too.
There's not a day, there's not a night that comes where I don't lay my head down on the pillow and think about the things that I said or did wrong that day.
Get out of your head.
I don't think that's ever going to end.
Yeah. Start looking at the good stuff that the growth that you've done, and where you're going to, and the relationships.
Grateful for.
I mean, for the fact that, you know, the kids and everybody's doing good, and you're really, you know, and I, you know, I've gone through that. Kelly's gone through that. You know, we've had all those acquaintances. Now it's like, well,
you know, you hit it on the head. If there's a parting comment, like learning to be grateful and thankful and appreciative, like when you do those things, man, you're moving down the right path.
And on that note, I'm going to say I'm thankful and grateful that you came back out of the woodwork again. And I believe that we'll probably bring you on because, you know, it's like the Coach House gang here. We're just going to chit chat and, you know, and just, but all three of us have gone through so much. But, you know, Jay, your wisdom and Your honesty and your vulnerability it's refreshing. And I feel that a lot of our audience, you know, they see a badass, but now they're seeing somebody who has a true heart, but who, you know, says, hey, I fucked up. And I'm going to keep on, you know, trying to make amends to that. But that's part of my growth.
Wisdom is a very odd word to use in the sentence with me, because wisdom is always something that I needed right after wisdom is always something that arrived right after I needed it. Like, that wasn't very smart.
Yeah, well, I think we've all been there too. I know.
That's a true story. Yes. And then, do you have anything else, Christy? I'm sorry.
No. We're good.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, again, we'll have you back. And I do think we need cocktails next time, even though it is the morning in Arizona.
Well, thank you for having me, ladies. Thank you for what you do and for your effort to try to help people. I love you guys. And so anything I can do for you, I'll throw that out there. That probably sounds like a hollow offer, because they're like, you can't even take care of yourself.
And that's bullshit, because we know you. And I know that if I ever, when we first started talking about this, I called you. I hadn't talked to you for a few years. And I'm like, we're going to be doing this. Would you come out of the woodwork? Of course. Anything you want, Christine. So I know when he says anything you want, he means it.
The offer continues to stand.
I know.
Excellent. And when you come up to Phoenix, we definitely need to get together. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. And I just want to wrap on so much of what we were talking about today is why we wanted to do this show and why it is called The Awesome Journey. Because every day we are on this side of the dirt. It's not always good. It's not always pretty. And sometimes it is downright ugly and super shitty. But on the other side of that is where things become awesome, particularly when we find our faith and guided by God. And that's what we believe, because we know when we try to control our lives, that's when shit goes sideways. It does for me anyways. So we will put all the links to Jay's books in the comments in our post promos, and we'll be also republishing our book for the holidays list, which will include Jay's books. And of course, he's not on social media, so you can't connect with him there. But until next Tuesday at 1:11 p.m., we thank you so much for being with us. And remember, we are all on this journey, and together we do make it awesome. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Jay.